Welcome in, everyone. It is the MULTIVAC podcast, and it's season 2. It's all about sustainability this time around, and we're going to start with food waste today. MULTIVAC was created because of food waste. Food packaging tries and aims to and does reduce 75% of food waste around the globe, so it's really important. But let's try and understand food waste a little bit. So to help me on that, we've got David and we've got Kitty. Kitty, you're from FareShare. Let's learn about FareShare a little bit more in a minute, which is a charity to do with food waste. But David, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm David Church. I'm one of the key account managers for MULTIVAC UK.
And I'm Kitty Langton. I'm the PR lead for FareShare. We are the UK's largest food redistribution charity. So we work across the food industry, so supermarkets, manufacturers, farmers. We get food that is good to eat but can't be sold, and we redistribute that to 8,500 charities all over the UK.
Wow, that's quite a big operation then.
Yeah, it's a logistical beast, I'd say. We've got about 35 warehouses, again, across all 4 UK nations. We deliver food in pretty much every local authority. You'll be hard-pressed not to walk in your local town or area, and there'll be a church hall that's got a local charity or community lunch. They're probably getting food from us. Okay,
and so have you got like different routes of like where the food comes from then?
Yeah, so supermarkets, farmers, manufacturers, wholesalers. We're always looking for new sort of food businesses to work with. So traditionally, I think when we started, it was when FareShare was started, it was sort of an offshoot of a Crisis and Sainsbury's partnership. And then it's sort of grown from then over the past 30 years. We are actually turning 30 next month, which is very exciting.
Wow.
But as we've sort of grown, we've been able to take more food on scale. So, working with, anything from like Prince's tuna to Quaker oats, any sort of food on scale that we can deliver to these charities. But we get that food, it's delivered to our warehouses, we sort it and store it and then deliver that out to charities. We also work with supermarkets so that some charities can collect it from back of stock. So when it's sort of almost towards its sell-by date, but we'll get on to sell-by and use-by dates later. The other place is obviously farmers and small scale growers, but there's a lot of food waste still happening across farms and across the food industry. But there's lots of different ways that we can get at it. We just need a bit more help from sort of more other places other than sort of the food industry.
Great, that's a fantastic introduction to FareShare. Everyone who knows me knows that I'm a bit of a stat man, okay? So if we look at a bit of stats on food waste and why this is such an important conversation when it comes to sustainability. So we waste globally 1.3 billion tonnes of food a year. That's just beyond crazy. In the UK alone, that's 9.5 million tonnes, yeah? Okay, and that average household, does anyone, either of you know sort of the average household waste?
I feel I should know this, but
I was staggered by this. Like my guess was way off. So roughly about 200 to 250 kilos per house of food is wasted every year.
What is the biggest product that gets thrown away, Elliot?
So potatoes, apparently. So my research tells me. Potatoes, and my wife would not allow that. She's Irish. It definitely wouldn't happen in our household. There's 200 kilos of potatoes every year. But yeah, so it's quite an impact, right? And MULTIVAC was created, I suppose the fundamentals of MULTIVAC is to plastic packaging and other types of mediums, wrap that food up, extend the shelf life for as long as possible and reduce that food waste. So, and that's been proven since the 80s, about 75% of food waste has gone down, 75% less. So if we think about that, that's 28 million tonnes would be wasted of food a year instead of 9.5 million in the UK if we didn't have packaging, which is quite crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to do some questions in a minute, but I'm going to start with a last fun fact. So, bag of carrots. This is a bit of a test, okay? So if you chuck a bag of carrots out, how many miles in a car is that equivalent to CO2 wasted?
I mean, I can't drive, so I feel like this is a question I definitely can't answer.
I can't answer it in miles on a train either.
No.
I've done this in cars.
I have no idea.
So if you chuck a bag of carrots out and it's gone wasted, it's about a mile in a car. Okay, so for every bag, and there's loads of bags that I know that unfortunately we sometimes have to chuck a carrot out or two, it's a mile in the car. Put that into context for beef. So if you chuck a steak out, Sorry to all those vegans out there. It is, any guesses? 82 miles.
Wow.
Okay, so packaging is so important in keeping that shelf life for as long as possible. It's really, really key. So let's get into some questions, and I'm going to let our guests pick them. Kitty, David, you can decide who goes first.
Kitty, after you.
Oh, thank you so much. So how do you think manufacturers can get involved with reducing food waste? I'm happy to answer this one first.
I'm going to let you start on that one.
Well, without plugging FareShare too much, I would say that manufacturers should definitely get in touch with FareShare. We are able to take food on scale. So, it's not just about getting, obviously, supermarkets, getting the stock from there is fantastic because it's really diverse, which is great for food parcels, particularly, the sort of food banks or food pantries we support. It's much more beneficial for people taking home a food parcel that's got lots of different types of food that they can take home and make delicious meals with. But we also support a lot of charities that have community kitchens, so they can cook, big sacks of tomato sauce that haven't been put into separate packaging yet, or big bags of flour that could be baked into something. Even things like a crate of bananas are about to go off. If you're in a pantry and you're looking at all the fresh fruit and like produce and you've just got, bananas that's about to go off, you're like, I could take 10 bananas home, but by the time I take them home, they're going to be rotten and my kids aren't going to eat them and they're just going to sit there smelling. Whereas something with a community kitchen would be able to sort of make lots of different things of banana bread and then put those into parcels as a little treat.
Got you.
So we can take things on scale. I would say get in touch with FareShare.
So they get in touch with you and then you start creating the pickup routes and the distribution routes to pick that food up, and then you'll take it off their hands.
And we can work, we've got, 30 years of experience of working with the food industry in terms of forecasting surplus. So we can work with them to identify where there may be gaps that they haven't quite figured out yet of like what to do with food that might be going surplus. I mean, that's particularly good with fresh produce because of, every summer we have something called Courgette Gate at FareShare, where we've got a glut of courgettes and last summer was particularly bad because it rained so much. And again, if you're going to a pantry and you're like, okay, right, I need rice, pasta, I need the essentials, I don't need like 20 courgettes, what am I going to do with those?
Courgette soup. Yeah. Massive batches of courgette soup coming out.
And I wish I could remember all of them, but some of the charities we're giving courgettes to are getting some really wacky courgette recipes. They're making like courgette bread, courgette like cupcakes, that sort of thing, because they were just trying to think like, what can we do with this? You've got all this delicious food. And they can also take that food and, some of the charities, they teach people how to cook and to make with them. They're cooking with surplus workshops. We're really good at taking on that food.
Brilliant. Should we do another question?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Oh,
go on, David. If you pick it, you've got to answer it.
Have I? What are the best initiatives you've seen UK supermarkets implement to reduce food waste?
Okay. Who wants to go first?
You can.
I can?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, David. Appreciate that. I think engagement with, maybe not an initiative as per se, as in like a name-branded initiative, but I would say engagement with the whole supply chain is really important. So we're seeing that more and more. When we weren't seeing that, especially when sort of the war on plastic started and things like that, the Blue Planet 2 days, that engagement wasn't really happening. Now it happens a lot. So right from what the supermarket wants to do on how they want to reduce packaging waste or improve food waste, but minimise plastic waste, I think that's really important now, and I think we're seeing that a lot more. So a lot more engagement from the head offices all the way down the supply chain, because it needs to be, because without it, it doesn't work.
If you look at nearly every retailer's website now, there is a set of objectives for reducing packaging, improving shelf life, reducing food waste, the whole sustainability package. But you can go on to them, they're all public. And it's really quite interesting.
The focus is on plastic though, isn't it? Which our podcasts always seem to come around to this
point.
Well,
plastic and transport, so transportation as well. So maximising your crate fill is one thing by reducing the amount of packaging you have. So you're putting less miles on a lorry, which is improving your carbon footprint as well.
But we forget why we do it, right? So we're talking about carbon footprint, but we really do it because we've got to maximise food shelf life, which in turn reduces food waste.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point. And we'll come on to it later, the whole minced change and transition into vacuum packaging. We'll talk about that a little bit later on how that's had an effect, and get your opinion on that, Kitty, as well. That would be really important. But in terms of initiatives, I like the mince one because I think that the stats are there and massively support the evidence. But it's not really branded because it's not about food waste. At the moment, it's more about packaging and what you're doing on the packaging side, but actually we forget it really is about the food waste.
Extending your shelf life on that product, yeah.
Kitty, have you seen anything?
I think there's, really small changes that, that can reduce both food waste and packaging in supermarkets. So I think when you see a lot of supermarkets have removed use by dates for some of their fresh produce, and they forget that most people have basic common sense that when you have, some bell peppers at home or something and they've gone a bit soft, it's kind of up to you whether you're like, oh, they've gone a bit soft, maybe if I chop that bit off, I can use the rest of it.
Yeah,
but if it's gone mouldy, then you're like, oh, I probably can't use this. But also, having more fresh produce out of packaging, particularly for people who live on their own or live on house shares. You go to a supermarket and all you get is like these big family-sized bags of stuff.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's actually much better to be able to just get what you need.
So take away the outer wrapping on the stuff that doesn't need it, and then buy the individuals, a little bit like the continental model. Very much, yeah.
The other interesting thing is you can have, multiple packs. So rather than one big pack of mince, for example, or one big pack of sausages, we started looking at splitting those down. So you can have them in perforated packs. So you only tear off exactly what you need. The other stuff can go into the freezer and you can use it at your own leisure. So for single people, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
They don't want to buy twin packs of steaks or twin packs of sausages, whatever.
No, what do they do once they've opened it?
Exactly. Whereas if you've got a perforation, one could go in the fridge or back into the freezer.
Yeah, it's a great shout. Great, so let's go to another question.
So how has the level of food waste been affected by the cost of living crisis? So many millions of tonnes gets wasted across the food industry, but there's 3 million of edible food that's going to waste on UK farms every year. And
it's insane.
Yeah, and if you think about not just how much that could help people, but also the environmental impact of that food not going to people. And the reason why we can't get as much food from farm gate is because it's very expensive for farmers to redistribute that food to people to eat. It's much cheaper for them to plough it back into the fields.
Or put it into anaerobic digestion.
Yeah, anaerobic digestion.
Which is probably the best, apart from eating it, it's probably the best thing to do with it because you're generating fuel and energy.
Yeah.
And it comes around in a circle. However, you've got people that need food.
Yeah. Anaerobic digestion, where food is not good to eat, anaerobic digestion is by far the best place to send it. It's a really fantastic way to reduce food waste because it is turned into biofuels. And also it does provide, a source of income for farmers as well because there's the AD subsidy. However, there's no subsidy for reducing food waste to get people to eat it. So
it's in their better interests
if you're a farmer,
not to distribute it.
Yeah, if you're a farmer and you're thinking, I've been really impacted by the cost of living crisis, as we all have, but particularly farmers, and you're thinking, I've got this food and I could send it to AD or I could send it to people to eat it. Obviously, you're going to choose the option that's going to be more beneficial to you. And
something that if it's a income source, then 100% they're going to do that.
Yeah, and again, AD is a really great way to deal with that type of food waste. But we think that where food is good to eat, it should be sent to people.
Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of resource gone into that. Energy, the farmer's land, all these sort of contributions. I know I put some stats up earlier, but that was calculated from all of those inputs. And then if it just goes to waste, all of that's gone to waste.
Yeah.
There's such a big knock-on effect.
Yeah. So we have a surplus of purpose fund, which helps cover the costs for extracting that food to people to eat it. But I think the biggest barrier for us for getting more of that food from farms is cost. We're calling on the government to help fund that. But again, there are plenty of other ways that we could work further upstream across the food industry to get that food out to people to eat it. It's just the farm gate stuff is really what we're focused on at the moment.
It's really fascinating what you say, and for whatever reason, we always come back to a political charge whenever we have these discussions. It's like the government needs to step in and do something about it because we have to have that directive, right?
Yeah.
That's really good. Should we let's move on? Let's do another one.
Next one. It's my turn, isn't it?
I've lost count.
What type of food waste causes the most damage to the environment?
I mean, I think throwing steaks into landfill probably isn't great for the environment, but...
I think I'd cry if I saw that happening too often.
Yeah, same. But again, I think you're just saying that a huge amount of resource goes into harvesting, processing, packaging, delivering food. So the worst type of food waste is the one that ends up in landfill.
Yeah, it's gone through the whole system.
Probably
about 6 different types of transport alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Getting food, edible food that would go to waste or food waste to people to eat is, by far one of the most environmental ways to deal with food waste. And that method is top of the food waste hierarchy. Sending it to landfill, any food sent to landfill is probably the worst way to deal with food waste.
Yeah, it's I just doing research for this. Apparently, potatoes is the most thrown out at home, and steak is like beef is the most environmentally impactful. I think it's because of the feed. It's just creating the feed for beef is more expensive than it is just to grow some carrots, which is crazy. It's Dave, what's your thoughts on?
I think you've got two things. There's the dairy industry as well, because obviously you need to preserve shelf life on dairy products.
Which is a lot shorter shelf life.
Yeah, it's a much shorter shelf life. So we've got to do what we can to preserve that shelf life. And the same with red meat or poultry, exactly same thing. Preserve the shelf life. Let's not chuck it in the bin, because that's where, as you're saying, it's going to landfill. It's a no-go, really. So let's do what we can to increase shelf life.
Yeah.
Either freeze it and the individual packets I said earlier, so perforation packs.
Yeah.
And then I think get consumers to shop more wisely as well. So not buy a kilo pack of mince, for example, when you only need 500 grams.
Yeah,
so
but it looks cheaper,
down.
right? Because of the way that we market
then,
it's cheaper to do that.
But I'm guilty of it. You'll see it because it's a decent value, so you'll buy it.
Yeah.
Maybe chuck half it in the bin.
Yeah.
Because you've tried to feed the whole family, and actually you've got surplus. And do you freeze that? Yes, we do sometimes. Sometimes it goes into the bin, and I think that happens all around the country.
Do you think it's an educational piece?
I think
from
so.
The supermarket.
So what we started doing at home, personally, and because I'm sick of chucking food away, I absolutely hate it.
Well, it's money at the end of the day.
It is money, and that's all I can see is pounds and shillings and pence going into the bin. So what we started doing is actually planning our weekly meals before we do a shop. So, it might be spaghetti bolognese, but we just plan each meal. So we're reducing the amount we're chucking away, whereas before we'd buy ad hoc.
And have you seen an effect? That's been a positive effect on the amount that you've thrown away?
Positive effect on the amount we throw away. We're not shopping ad hoc. So we're saving some money as well, because usually you'd go in and you might spend, 30 quid or whatever retailer. And actually, for 120 quid, you can shop for half a week, or 200 quid, you've got a week's worth of shopping if you planned it properly. And you don't buy things all the time. So if you're doing it ad hoc, for example, you'd buy a packet of pasta, and you go in again, you buy another packet, you end up with a cupboard full of half-empty packets
loads
of pasta.
Loads of different types of pasta you do.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
in your head, that doesn't go off, so that's okay. But when it comes to proteins and things...
Exactly, so you buy the right amount. That's what we've started doing, and I think it's educating people to do that. And I think some of these, HelloFresh, those type of meals, people have started using those.
Because they're really specific.
They are really specific, and you've got the right amount for the right number of people. So you can have a meal for 2, for 4. I sound like I'm advertising them now.
No,
it's just a good idea. I should have said meal kit company, shouldn't I? But
yeah, we're not the BBC.
Yeah. But something like that makes a difference.
Kitty, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I guess if you're thinking about reducing food waste at home, I think there's definitely been a sort of cultural shift. So things like Olio, Neighbourly, even meal kit companies, you'll see that people are being much more conscious of how much food they're using and getting the most out of it. And I think what started as a more environmental standpoint has kind of occurred at the same time as the cost of living crisis. I think it's very interesting how both those things have happened at the same time, because you're seeing, people really needing to get the most out of their food and really thinking carefully and cautiously about how much they're buying.
I agree.
And I think that, we have seen a response from supermarkets in the way that they're packaging things in terms of their size, just anecdotally speaking.
Yeah.
I think, we often we not so much recently, we're starting to do that again with FareShare, is using our charities to sort of distribute sort of meals or like, surplus meals. We've
Like set meals or...
Not set meals, recipes. is
Okay.
what I mean.
Okay, so like a meal kit or a recipe.
No, it's more just like, we'll work with, for example, Albert Bartlett, speaking of how much potatoes are thrown
Yes,
away.
okay.
Or, we'll work with one of our supermarket partners. They've got a cookery school. They might host a cooking with surplus workshop at a local charity. And, often people, when they're going to a charity to get food, they don't have a lot of time. So the idea of, getting loads of fresh produce, chopping up loads of carrots, making it into a stew, then serving it to their teenage sons who are really hungry and growing at the speed of light, that's not really going to cut it. So it's getting that surplus food. If you're going to get a food pass and you've got 3 onions, a carrot, a tin of tomatoes, and you've got some sugar and salt at home, they could teach you how to make a pasta sauce that they could put into freezer bags and freeze. So that's one way that we work with our food partners. Other ways is, to go back to Albert Bartlett, is, they understand how many potatoes are thrown away, but they also know how much you can get out of a potato.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you might get a potato that's massive and you're only feeding 2 people. Like, what do you do? Do you just cut half of it? And then what do you do with the other half? What could you do with the skins?
Yeah.
You can turn that into crisps. You could cut the ends of your courgettes and onion skins and everything and turn that into vegetable stock. There's a lot more that you can get out of food. And I think there's much more appetite for that from a lot of consumers because they're wanting to make sure that, extend the shelf life of the food in their fridge, not just in supermarkets.
Yeah. Education is what just keeps popping out to me every time we're talking. It's education. I wonder if that's a political, angle or if that's a supermarket angle. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I think food education could definitely be improved, but I don't think it's going to solve the issue that we have overnight, which is that just people need more food.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that more of that food that is good, that is going to waste, is getting to people. But again, if you've not got a lot of time, you need to think of new ways to cook it.
Ready, steady, cook. When you were talking about, I had some 3 onions and I had tomatoes. And I'm thinking, Ainsley Harriott would know what to do with this.
Yeah. I think I'd probably be in the won't cook. I can cook, but I won't a lot of the time.
Not the can't cook.
No, not can't. I can cook, but yeah, I just won't cook. I'll find any excuse not to cook. So yeah, I'm one of the baddies.
Whose turn is it? Next question.
Is it me? You?
I've lost count.
I think it's you, actually.
Okay. Do you think that the introduction of the vacuum-packed mints last year had a negative or positive impact on food waste and sustainability?
I'm going to let you lead on this.
Okay.
Because obviously Dave and I were heavily involved in this. So I'd like to hear your opinion about it.
This is my personal opinion. Obviously it reduced plastic, didn't it? So
yes, significantly, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, we can look at, I think some of the, backlash, I wouldn't really call it backlash, is first of all, people said they didn't like the look of it, which I think you can quite easily get over. Because it's still the same product, and once you open it, it smells the same, it looks the same, it cooks the same. I think, maybe part of it was slightly less easy to recycle, but I do think that it's not that inconvenient to take something to a supermarket you're going to go to anyway to recycle that plastic as well.
Okay.
I think it had a positive impact generally. I think with FareShare, we're really good at identifying surplus of food. Not so much with packaging because it's not where our expert lies, and we do kind of need to look to, organisations like MULTIVAC or other packaging companies just to see how we can reduce packaging when we're doing things like the Flex project, when we've got again a surplus of peppers and tomatoes that we can turn into soup. Are we using the most sustainable methods to tin that?
Yeah, or keep it for longer. Can we package it quickly and keep it for longer?
Yeah.
It's the mince one's interesting. So you highlighted the plastic reduction on that. So, but vacuum packed mince doubles the shelf life. So that was one of the biggest drivers for the manufacturers, was to double that shelf life, which is interesting, isn't it? Because what we see from a supermarket point of view is we see different packaging, reduced packaging, less plastic, but what we don't see is the food waste impact, and that was probably the biggest driver, David.
Yeah. Both.
doing
No,
mints?
twofold. The reduction in packaging and the increase in shelf life.
It's and that's sort of like together. Well, again, more stats. Here we go. So I'll do the food waste last. And actually, I'll do the food waste first. So 75 tons of CO2 a year was saved by moving MAP from MAP mints. That's got MAP because we've got the flow wrap as well, which is MAP.
Yeah.
Which is where we gas flush it, to the vacuum pack, which is what you were talking about there, Kitty, where it changes the mint
We're taking
slightly.
the atmosphere out the pack by pulling the vacuum, whereas an MAP pack is a modified atmosphere pack. So we're putting gases in as a preservative.
Right.
So the vacuum creates a longer shelf life. It stops any of the meat. It slows down the meat process breaking down. And then MAP, when we throw gases into it, that slows it down, but just not as much. So the traditional way is to throw CO2 and oxygen into beef.
Yes.
So that's 75 tons of CO2 a year saved on food waste alone, and that was just by doubling the shelf life. So it goes from 10 days to about 20 days. Packaging reduction was 3,900 tonne, okay? And then the transport, which is often the one that everyone forgets about because the packages are less, so you have to use less trucks, was about 4,100. So the amount of CO2, we've started to measure things in CO2 now from a sustainability point of view. And we made a joke earlier, didn't we? Sustainability question mark. How do you measure it? How do you look at it? And there's many different ways, but the carbon footprint seems to be the one that people are now sort of focusing on. So that was about 8,000 tons a year on that mince project.
I think just from an economical perspective, just extend the shelf life of meat.
Yeah.
It just makes sense, makes business sense. Obviously, it's hugely important at reducing carbon emissions, but you need stuff to be staying on the shelf for longer.
Yeah.
And that's really valuable, isn't it, from a person that looks at food waste day in, day out. And it sounds really obvious, but it isn't, because we forget why packaging's there in the first place, I think. I was in a shop once. I was in a shop many times, but I was in a shop at this particular time buying a load of samples for one of our shows, and I had loads of different things. I had about 40 different packages, and the guy, "What are you doing?" I said, "I work for a food packaging company." "Oh, right, well, oh, you're just one of those people that puts plastic on the shelf." "Actually, do you know why plastic is there?" "Well, yeah, it's to stop grubby fingers touching my meat before I get to it." And that was his opinion, and that's fine. But that, again, it come back to the education of why packaging is needed. So I tried to educate him, and I don't think it went well. But that is the general consensus. That's like what we call a dust cover in the industry, right? So it just covers, but actually it's there for a real good purpose. And that mince project was a real highlight for me on how we can extend the shelf life. Something we've done for years. One way we need to change the mind of many people. And we go back to that initiative from the supermarkets again. Getting a supermarket to take the plunge to do that was a huge step. Like Sainsbury's needs to be applauded for that, because that was a big step. But then you've got everyone in the supply chain that you have to bring into line and try and get there with it. So,
how can food waste contribute to the energy grid?
Great. I mean, we kind of, I think, pulled up on this a little bit earlier with anaerobic digestion. But do you want to explain what anaerobic digestion is, maybe?
So I will. This is a very lay understanding of it. But where food is not good to eat, for example, it's no longer edible. That can be sent to something called an anaerobic digester, which is basically a machine that turns that into biofuels or biogas. It's quite innovative what they can do. So it's not just, rotten carrots. It's also things like chicken poo. Like, they can take actual waste and turn it into biofuels.
I didn't realise that. I thought it was just food.
Yeah,
Oh,
so they can do quite a lot with it. And again, it's really beneficial, because where food is not good to eat, it needs to go somewhere. If it goes into landfill, it's just going to emit a lot of carbon emissions.
Yeah, that's the worst solution.
And again, a lot of farmers do plough it back in the field. Sometimes they just can't. So, that's the best way to deal with it. And
it's important, isn't it, to be able to have that, because we've got to stop it going to landfill, from what you were saying. And this is a solution that farmers can. I think earlier we were also talking about like the sort of financial benefits to the farmer.
Yeah.
So the restrictions, right, were from what I can get from what you were saying, that it's cheaper for them and more beneficial for them to do anaerobic digestion than it is to actually send that good food back into sort of the charity like yourself to be able to utilise.
Yeah, and the anaerobic digestion, they don't want to take good food. They want that food to go to people.
They want the rotted stuff.
Everyone in the food industry, everyone hates food waste.
Yeah.
They hate seeing good food going to waste. I don't think you can. No one would argue with that. And it's the same with the anaerobic digestion industry. They want good food to be going to people, or to be going to, for example, another way to deal with it is going to animal feed. They only want to take food that's no longer good to eat.
Great. So anaerobic digestion then is more of an add-on sort of solution than it is the overall solution. Well, it shouldn't just all go to energy production, right?
No, the other thing is, if you put it into landfill, you produce a lot more methane, whereas if your anaerobic digester reduces the amount of methane, so your greenhouse gases drop as well.
Got you. Great. Brilliant. Okay. Who's up next? Next question.
What's the difference between best before and used by?
One for
Dates.
you, Kitty. This.
I can answer this. So best before and used by. So best before is when the food is at its best quality. So after the best before, it may change in like texture or taste or colour, but very minimal. They're just saying that this is the best time to eat this. So, but again, that's slightly subjective. So for example, I like bananas when they're slightly green. Other people like bananas when they're a bit brown. Apparently there's no nutritional value when bananas are really green, which is devastating to me.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I think there is, but I think, you should eat bananas when they're a bit more ripe. But then the use by date is when it's safe to eat. However, WRAP released some guidance, I think in 2020, saying that actually, there is a bit of wiggle room there. And we've been able to adopt that guidance in our warehouses so that, for example, if we're getting things like long life milk, if it's been stored in the right way and we're, quite sophisticated in how we can measure that as well, right temperature, everything, we can extend the shelf life of that by a certain amount. And we can do it across a lot of food types. But then when we get to fresh produce, again, it's common sense.
Yes.
If you're holding up, fruit or veg and it doesn't feel right, it doesn't smell right, you're probably not going to give it to someone to eat or eat it yourself. And I think that there's been a lot more, again, when I talk about the cultural shift of food waste, I think there's been a lot more of that. I never lived in a time when there wasn't such a thing as perishables and like use by dates and sell by dates. And I think, when I speak to my parents, they're like, if you think an egg is off, you put it in a glass of water and see if it floats. There's lots of...
Interesting. Whereas my mum will go against the date.
Really?
Oh, yeah, if it's a day over, it's out.
Really?
That would not
Which
do
I
well
love
in
going
my
around
house.
at that point because I get a load of free food. She doesn't want any more, but it's perfectly fine.
We didn't have much of a choice. We had chickens growing up, so that was the...
I see.
You'd collect them every day, but you'd find them
You'd have to measure them in the water trick, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's lots of ways that you can identify when food is still good to eat, even if, the numbers on the packaging say that you can't. And again, that is kind of helping to extend the sort of household shelf life of food as well.
What about use by then? Is that like the strict don't use it after this date?
So
that's stating the obvious.
So yeah, that's what I mean by the WRAP guidance is that they were able to extend the use by date in accordance with food safety guidelines. There's quite specific guidelines for that, but with fresh produce, it is it's literally a common sense method. Yeah. And the people who work in our warehouses and our network partners, they have really close relationships with these charities. They might be supporting hundreds across their region or, thousands or something. And they need to maintain those relationships. It's the same as having, a manufacturer and a customer, is that they want to make sure that food that they send is really good. It's like diverse stock. So they can carry on working with them and supporting their community.
Oh, fantastic. It's education, isn't it? I was thinking when you were talking, the continental model of much more open produce, so to figure out, to focus on the produce bit. You'll go to Spain, France, and it will be all open. There won't be much plastic. There won't be much individual wrapping on things. They must have less food waste as a result because they can sort of measure it. Is a pepper off? Is it slightly soft? Is it okay? Or than the UK because they will literally go off the date and then.
I think it's slightly different as well. So there's like culture difference, I would say, as in you'd have, I'm going back to 50s, 60s, where people would preserve stuff. So, if you had a glut of eggs, they might pickle some eggs, as an example, make a chutney that, because not everything was available as it is now. So you'd have true seasons of produce that was available. So you'd preserve it, you'd use it. And I think it still happens quite a lot in, Southern Europe, especially, that they'll take peppers, they'll roast them, they'll soak them. They'll soak them in olive oil. Then you've got your wonderful antipasta that's, is preserved naturally.
Yeah,
it's just a bit.
We just don't have that mindset.
No, we don't. No.
On a sort of industry level, the UK is lagging behind our European counterparts in terms of food waste. So, France, Spain, the US even, much better reducing food waste. But I think it's really interesting because a lot of what you said was about the Mediterranean diet, and how, there's so much you can get out of one item of food just to keep extending it.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe we should all just adopt the Mediterranean diet.
I have. And
I like the Mediterranean diet.
I'm more than happy with that.
You can see what I mean, though, can't you?
100%. It's just something that we just don't do. It's again, is it an educational thing? I don't know.
I think, it's a cultural shift, as you said. It's education. It's, again, I think, we sort of non-perishables or perishables came into effect. And if you've grown up with them, it seems like a hard and fast rule. And I think there's a slow educational piece happening where it's kind of, you can use a bit of common sense here. You just might need to know what to look out for. And it's happening at the same time that people are really trying to extend the shelf life of their own food because they want to get as much out of it as possible.
So it's now that we're almost forced, because we can't afford as much as we ever used to. Now we're forced to try, and that's really interesting. Hopefully that'll make a big difference. Who's on the next question?
Oh, it's you, isn't it?
Last couple.
Right. What is the best way to recycle food waste? So I think it's interesting, recycle, because what you're saying about the plastic, about how it's actually much better to reduce the amount of plastic rather than creating plastic that can be recyclable.
Yeah.
And I think that relates to, there's been, again, a shift in the environmental movement away from just recycle to saying upcycle, reuse. And I think that's what we do with edible foods that's going to waste, is that instead of, I think when people think of recycle, they think of, putting it into a pulp and then making it into something new.
like a completely different product.
Exactly. And I guess that's what we're doing with the Flex project, which is when we're getting, a huge surplus of fresh produce, we're thinking about how we can turn that into tinned soups or cubes of carrots or, something like that, so that we can extend the shelf life of it. I think, again, that's sort of recycling, but I think it's more like upcycling or reusing to get that to people to eat it. But it's, probably the most environmentally friendly way that you can deal with edible food that's going to waste.
Yeah, okay.
What you don't want to do is put it into a black bag, do you? And it's not everybody can do this, but you want a compost bin in your kitchen. You want a green bin outside that then it doesn't go to landfill, that gets made into compost, which eventually then comes round and is used in your gardens for replanting your bedding plants or whatever. That's something else that people need to understand that they can do. It's really easy, isn't it? You can put eggshells in there, you can put peelings in there, it's just like another
composting
option.
is just a whole realm. I don't think many of the UK people, personally, I don't have one. So, because I don't know what to do with one. Dave, do you have one?
Yeah, but it gets collected.
Do you have one?
It gets collected by the recycling team.
So I live in the city.
Yeah, what am I going to do with this compost if I don't have a garden?
But it gets collected by the recycling team. So I'm not saying compost it yourself. You put it into a bin.
And then they
come
take
round
it, so
as
it's
part
food
of your
waste
refuse.
bin.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, food waste bin.
And that goes to wherever they then age it, mix it, I don't know.
Yeah,
turn it into compost.
Turn it into compost is a great way. Like if we're talking about recycling, and Kitty, your description of recycling is really, really good, because it's changing it into something completely different, rather than just taking a potato that's going off and how many different things I can use it for.
Yeah.
How can we recycle it into something different? Compost is completely different, right?
Yeah, it is. And so your grass clippings go into the same bin. That's what we have in my local area.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you chuck your grass clippings, hedge cuttings, food waste. I don't think it's particularly meat, but
in Leeds we don't have that.
So I think
it's grass only.
I think people found over COVID sort of bin collections changed a bit, especially with food waste. and it's not really come back in the same way in a lot of councils, unfortunately. I mean, we have a food waste bin, and it's really easy because you've just got a big bin outside the block of flats, so you just dump everything into.
Yeah.
But not in plastic bags, right?
It's in a sort of biodegradable.
So you have, so they provide the bag.
No, we have to go and buy them.
All right, okay. So,
So
that'd be
some
that'd be a composting plastic.
Ours isn't. It's just straight in.
It's straight in the
Into the bin, yeah.
That goes back to the whole different collection systems, one
Yes, it
bin
is, yeah.
thing. Like that's obviously
And
changing.
that's
in
the
legislation
difficult
at the
part, isn't
moment.
it? Because nearly every single authority has a different waste management structure.
Yeah,
But
which is
if
the
you,
massive problem to sort out.
if you go somewhere like Germany, they'll have a bin for unrecyclable waste, glass, plastic, paper, and food, and people just do it.
Yeah.
Again, it's a cultural thing. If they just know that's what you have to do to split your bin, split your waste into. Otherwise, you get fined or your bins don't get collected.
Yeah.
It's quite extraordinary that here you can put all your recycling into just one bin.
Yeah, we can have so pizza boxes, notoriously hard to recycle. Some councils will take pizza boxes, some people won't take pizza boxes. There's too much ambiguity and too much. I think we need to take a little bit more of a approach from our continental friends. Like you say, Kitty, they are ahead, in terms of many different things, and bin collection is one of them. All right, so that kind of covers the questions that we had. Okay, I think that sort of wraps up the podcast. Before we go, Kitty, I think it's important, people that want to get involved in FareShare, do a little plug for them. I think that's the right thing to do.
So there's lots of ways you can get involved with FareShare. Obviously, if you are someone in the food industry, please get in touch with us. We can help you identify surplus, help support your food waste reduction targets, but also you're going to be helping a really fantastic cause, supporting loads of charities all over the UK. We are also, again, looking to the manufacturing industry to get them to help us to figure out how to reduce surplus in all its forms, whether that's with packaging or delivering, reducing our energy costs, the cost of running our warehouses. We're always interested in hearing from the more logistical side of things and how to support us. But if you're an individual, come volunteer. We've got warehouses all over the UK, all 4 UK nations. That could be anything from, sorting food to driving to, supporting some of our beneficiaries with CVs if you're an HR specialist. There's lots of ways that you can get involved, so please get in touch with us for that. Otherwise, as always, donating. We are a charity. We rely on charitable donations. So, £1 that we spend redistributing food, we create up to £6 of socioeconomic impact and savings to the state. So savings through the NHS, cost of reducing food waste, childcare. So anything you do to help us will have a really big impact.
I thought I was going to be the only one throwing stats out today. That's a great start.
I've got plenty of them. I've been told to reduce them and these sorts of things.
Look, that's been really fascinating. Certainly for me, I've learned a lot from the subject on food waste and what you can do to sort of help combat that. So thank you for coming. Thank you for being part of the podcast. David, thank you for being part as well.
No problem.
Appreciate it. And see you next time. And remember to like and smash that follow button. Thank you.